Hello, sir.
Hi, Wim.
Right, how's it going?
Pretty busy, but good. How about you?
Good. Also, same, right?
Yeah, obviously, as always, right?
Always cooking something.
Yeah, there's a semester start this week, and so
Ah,
I'm teaching a course about advanced networks, and so yeah, it's tough, and also the batch release and stuff. So it starts everything, and we have had two huge industry projects. So
yeah. Yeah,
I'm trying to yeah to work a few things. So as I saw your pull request.
yeah, thanks for the review. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi guys.
Hey,
Hello.
Hello.
hey, Fabian. So should we can start, right? I think Alex is not here, right?
Yeah, he's off today and the next 2 times.
Yeah. I'll see whether Gertly is on. I forgot to mention Fabian will also be part of the code owners and the reviewer. So we need to make that happen as well. So, okay, links there. Yeah. So the content that let me share my screen probably. Right. Okay. So the topics that we have for today is release content discussion, CNCF and Helm chart repo, right? Do anyone else have any other topic? No.
No.
Then let's start with release content. So I think we have merged both config server and data server, Marcus, right? So I tagged config server with 0055. I don't know whether you have tagged the data server already, Marcus, or not yet. You're on mute if you want to speak. Right?
Sorry. No, haven't tagged anything.
So okay. Yeah, the only thing that I was not able to do, I think you have run an integration test between main config server and and local data server, and I did the opposite. But I'm not able to run at the moment is to run the integration test, both being in main. I was not able to succeed in that. Do we want to do that before tagging? And because in parallel, I also prepared the docs. So all the changes for the docs. So I think Severin has reviewed them already. So thanks for that. But what is in the docs? So far, we have done a number of changes. So one of the big one from a, let's say, a content point of view is that we moved the namespace from network system to SDC system, right? And the second big change is that, okay, in the docs, before we had this collocated and distributed type of installation, and that also got changed. So I removed the collocated part. I just have installation. And so now we have, I think, Fabian, we discussed it a while ago, I think, whether we had this issue, whether there was a crash of the data server, and then also the API server was not reachable, and it created all kinds of, let's say, circular dependencies. So we also have now the API server as a separate pod, then a controller server with a bunch of reconcilers from the config server inside, and then which is also a deployment. And then we have a stateful set, which is a collocated data server plus parts of the config server. And so that's the big, let's say, from an installation point of view, the big change. So there's a bunch of ISO in the docs. I have updated them actually last night or something, and then this morning. So there's quite a number of changes with respect to that because it's all over the place in the docs that have been updated. There is one thing that I did not merge because Marcus had a separate PR for it, which is, so let me share that stuff. By the way, Gurley, since you're on, also Fabian will be part of the maintainers and the code owners, so we need to add him to the list if you can do so.
He dropped off again.
No action. If you give it action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So
but it's nice with the split. I mean, as soon as it's tagged or the docs is there, we can try it out on our side.
Yeah, so the idea is, or the idea that I had was, so there is one PR that was opened by Marcus. So I did not update that part of the docs, which is related to how to do the dev. So to do a local dev container and have a development environment associated. So that's a PR. I think someone still needs to review that to be able to merge. So I approved this, but someone needs to do so. And then there is a second PR, which is related to the new stuff. But here we need to, I added a tag for the config server. We also need to add a tag for the data server here. And then someone, if someone can approve it, then we can merge it. And then the docs will be aligned with the main release. And then we have so that's our release cycle, or that will be our release. I also planning to tag the docs once this is done, so that we have the docs and I call it v00.1 for the time being. But at least then we have a reference to a combination that is reusable, right? So that was my plan as well. So the PR name or the branch is called V001. So I added it like that. So that's what I did. So basically, yeah, we want to, the sooner we can do that, I think the better it will be, because then, so there are a number of big changes inside. One is of course, the split and this rework of how the components are installed. Then the whole deviation rework is there. We added a small PR for the target name. There is a bunch of issues that were seen during the testing and stuff like that were all included. So basically, it gets us back to a base. So that's why I think it's important to get this done ASAP. So the actions, I think, which I see is, I think Marcus tag data server, right? Review the docs. So update the docs with a new tag, which is basically one line. Then get the docs reviewed, and then we'll release it. And I think, then the only open question is the integration test, whether we can run them somehow. If you can look at that.
And for the tags, I know, sorry if you discussed that, but did you ever discuss maybe the jumping to 0.1 now with this big reorg and the different deployment, or?
It's all up to us. We can decide what we do. The only thing that is not there yet is this clear deviation. So at the moment, so there is one feature that we are missing. So if you deploy a non-revertive mode, and there is a note in the release, in the docs, by the way. So I added a note in the docs to say, if you want to clear deviations, we are working, it's work in progress somehow is the text. So that's one thing that we did not do. And the idea is also to discuss that part, if we can, in today's meeting. I have a proposal in the PR. that I wanted to discuss with the team. But that's the only thing that we lack from the past, is that we don't have an ability to clear deviations at the moment when you run in non-revertive mode. But apart from that, I think it's a good foundation. So it's up to us what we do. I mean, we can decide as a team how we want to tag it.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any other opinions. I mean, sometimes I think it's not so bad to go to 0.1 or something. It's also a big change. It also, I mean, if I go to my DevOps, I can say, hey, look, we have this new version 0.1. It's
okay.
Sounds like a better, bigger change, but
yeah, we can tag it V010 or something like that instead of V001. Yeah, which is fine by me.
Yeah,
Anyone?
I agree. It's at least a minor change, so I would also prefer 0.1, 0.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Let's do it like that. Okay. By the way, Gurley, yeah, maybe we, yeah. So let's get this done ASAP. Then we have a new base. Yeah. Then maybe we can quickly jump on Gurley. So there was two things. One is we also will. I want to add Fabian as a code maintainer and owner. So we should add him to the list. And then maybe can you give us a quick update on CNCF status, maybe, before we jump in the other?
Yes. Yes, so now we are waiting basically for Nokia to sign the contributor agreement.
Okay.
And we have a bit of an issue there because we cannot prove that we own the logo.
Okay.
And we cannot assign the logo if we do not own it. Now I'm exploring alternative solutions. So what if we create a new logo? Or what if we say that we do not have a logo? Both of them are, I think, could work from our lawyer's perspective. I didn't ask them yet, but these are like, this could, let's put it away, like give a way out of this situation where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the logo that we created is kind of, yeah, I have no problem changing it because
I like it, by the way. So that's why I was a bit hesitant, but now it's like, I was like ping-ponging with lawyers back and forth, and it seems that we cannot progress with this. So far, we are stuck a bit on this.
Yeah, but then I propose to ditch the logo because we anyhow, I think in CNCF we can create a new logo, right? And we can make it similar to the previous.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Okay, let's do that. I will ask our lawyer person if that would be okay for us, and then we can move on with that option.
okay.
But that's the big blocker now. So CNCF is waiting for us to be able to sign the contributor agreement.
Yeah, let's then ditch the logo and then.
And I also promise that you will handle the domain transfer in your name.
Yeah, that's not a problem, man. That I own myself.
Yeah, cool. All right. Yes, and for Fabian, please, Fabian, send me your GitHub handle in Discord. I can ping you there.
Another thing that we discussed in that regard was, is it possible to influence the appearance of contributors in that review list in GitHub PRs, right? Because I mean, always Karim and Hans appear now like pretty high in the up in the list, and then you have to click the more button to see, for instance, Severin. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's related to the order that they are mentioned in the contributors file, or if there isn't like totally different algorithm behind it or so. But yeah, if that's related to key contributors file, then I would suggest like putting Karim and Hans like to the back of the list.
I will Google this a bit. I do not know, to be honest, what's the algorithm to offer you the reviewers.
I also don't know, but yeah, that's something I saw, and I think makes most sense to have the active people being more present.
Yeah, I will look into that.
Cheers, Gege.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Some review order.
Oh, one more thing about this. I think Fabian is responsible. I would like to change how we are managing the code owners file. I would like to create a group from organization level.
Sure.
And refer only to the group. So it's more easy to modify the list, because now we have to create PRs for all the repos. In that way, we just add and remove people from the group. So I will do that change also.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because right now it's a bit of a pain every time you have to add.
Yeah.
So you have to review.
I was even thinking about maybe I should start to run the GitHub MCP server and use that to
yes. True. All right, then we have Helm chart repo, right? I don't know who put that on the list. I know we are discussing in the Discord somehow. I still haven't looked into the detail. I mean, I really love that someone did that, so that's great.
Yeah, I think this is from Marcus.
It's from Marcus, okay.
I think so. It's related to the Discord discussion. If it does make sense to shift to Helm for our artifacts.
Yeah, so my view, I see, my view is that we need different options, right? Like what we have right now is it's rudimentary. If you look to Nefio, for example, they hate Helm somehow, right? So that's why we started with a raw baseline, but I do see the value of also having Helm. So my view is we should offer options to people, right? Because at the end of the day, these are these raw manifests where you have to do some variable substitution somehow. That's what you need. Like even customize, we have to support, I think. So we have to get all these different options listed, I guess, at some point supported. And then, but what for me is important is that we have a single source of truth somehow. So in other words, because what we have seen over the past, or at least, and we still have a bit of a challenge there, by the way. And so far, and maybe it's also a good discussion, is that at some point we had this back and forth, right? So the issue, right? What we have done so far, maybe let me explain a little bit the history, and I'm happy to change it if there is better alternatives. So one is our artifacts right now, they live in config server repo, okay? The reason why that is the case is because in config server, some of the tests, so I'm doing some unit tests based on the artifacts to check that our code is still working with those artifacts, right? So for example, not all the examples, but a lot of the examples are originated from that repo. And so what we've seen in the past is that once you change an artifact and then your docs are not up to date, so it created a bit of an issue in the beginning, and still we have had issues. So since we did that, we no longer had these issues, by the way. But so long story short, we put the artifacts into config server repo. Now, that has disadvantages from the fact that right now integration tests as well as the docs, they use the config server artifacts as a source of truth somehow, right? So we have we have some scripts in the docs that use the artifacts, and also in integration tests that basically take the artifacts as a source of truth, and then they basically rebind them in the local context. For example, in the docs, we use them to override the images, right? Because the images, once we release in the docs, have a different tag than the one in the config server, right? And so we basically change them. But what you see is that the overall artifacts are basically the same. There is some variables that we change based on the local environment, right? And so the issue that one of the issues that we have right now in so I think in docs it's okay, right? Because you typically release config server or a version of config server as part of the docs, so that's fine. The main issue that I've seen is in integration tests, is that if you do a change in config server, you kind of have to update integration tests in order to make use of that. Because because sometimes we have these dependencies between config server and data server, because there is a proto, right, that is in between. So if you do a change in config server, you have to have data server. So we have this circle of dependencies between integration tests that create some challenges. Right. We had this issue basically now because our integration tests were not really running due to this issue for a while. And now, since we merged again, this is fixed, or this will be fixed, but we have this issue that that integration tests are somehow depending on these artifacts. And I think that's at the moment the biggest challenge that we have with it. So the reason they are in there is really just to make sure that if we do, for example, an API change, that we still have the rest of the system work, right? Otherwise, you get this, so we have these interdependencies between this project. So that's the current state of affairs. So for example, if we now generate Helm charts, ideally they should be generated from the same source.
The question I'm asking myself is, what's the benefit we get from Kform, right? Because like right now, looking at it, the only thing we do is to replace the version numbers, or like that, these two image tags, right? So.
Yeah, so Marcus, I think this is irrespective of Kform, right? So whatever variable substitution you use doesn't really matter, right? So for me, this whole discussion is independent of that.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, does it make sense to take the Helm chart based artifacts that do have these variables and optional sections and whatever is in there as our primary way of storing and representing the artifacts, and then we'll do the Helm. I don't know Helm very well enough, right? But like do the Helm and enrichment, and then we can also use those and publish them on the via the docs and so on.
I'm not a big fan of Helm,
and
the following reason is because Helm is a very opinionated way of shipping artifacts. It's of course a very popular way, but the problem is you kind of encapsulate your artifacts in Helm, which is basically the whole reason what Nephew tries to fix. I'm not a big fan of using Helm as a primary source because I see Helm a good way as a derived source, but not as a primary source, because you need to, if you want to have another format, you have to extract all the stuff from Helm. Because Helm is kind of a gold templating system at the end of the day. So you kind of have to extract all the gold templating from it to add the artifact. So right now what we have is we have very clean artifacts that you can move to anything. So having Helm as a primary source, this is not a good idea.
Okay.
But as a secondary, for sure, but not as a primary. And we have to have Helm as a support, right? The problem is that Helm encapsulates your artifacts in gold templates, basically. That's the big issue. And so you kind of build a shield around it. So in other words, your APIs are no longer native. That's the big issue with Helm. But yeah, so for me, the discussion was more, okay, is there a better way to solve the integration test issue? I think that's one of the issues that we have to discuss and see whether we have a better way of doing that, because we always have this, we will always have this dependency somehow otherwise.
Yeah, but the other question is also kind of pounding, right? Because we have Mark sitting there working on the Helm charts, and we also need to find a way to support that rather soon, right?
Yeah.
So we have two items here to discuss. This is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I haven't looked into. I'm going to have a look at the Helm work to see whether we can optimize it a little bit, because how I'm sitting is every time you do something, you have to maintain it, right? And if the maintenance is too high, it's not good.
Yeah, true.
You even see that in the docs right now, right? We changed SDC system and it's all over the place that you have to update it. So you spend 2 hours. I mean, it's still reasonable, right? But even that we should not have, in my view. Anything you can do to reduce the life cycle of maintaining these things. And I believe, so don't get me wrong, Helm is a very important entity, so we need to have that. But we need to do it in a way that we can easily maintain, is my point.
Agree, yeah. I'm not deep enough in the whole Helm and whatever else there is in that area to have a proper discussion. But like from my perspective, what I'm seeing is we have Kform that's just sitting there and replacing 2 variables, right? Something that we can even accomplish with what's it called, env subst, like bash tool, right? Pushing in these two things. On the other side, we have that Helm chart repository created by him now, which offers loads of options to configure. I don't know, he mentioned limits and all sorts of stuff, right? So that's like what I'm seeing from my perspective, and that's why I brought it up that way. But yeah, I'm not here to tell exactly what needs to be done, right? Yeah, we need to discuss.
We need to look at it.
People that have the right knowledge and a proper view on the whole ecosystem, I think.
Wim, can you maybe explore a little bit or explain a little bit more how Kform works? Because I mean, I was a bit overwhelmed by this large PR, and then you said, yeah, you have to stuff with Kform, and now we have this Helm chart, but I think these are different things.
Yeah, so Kform is something I created at the time of Nephew, right? So the big issue that we all have is somehow an artifact needs to be changed based on certain, let's say, context and environment, right? So in other words, if you compare, so at the moment, what are the mechanisms that you typically have in Kubernetes, right? So So you have customize, right? Which is also a very, let's say, native approach. So you take a piece of artifacts which are native, and then you can substitute anything inside. Okay.
Yes.
If you look, I think there is another tool which is actually the same as Kform in most of its form. I forgot its name.
KRO.
Yeah, KRO. Yes, indeed. KRO is doing exactly what Kform was doing. The advantage of customizing KRO and Kform is kind of you take a native artifact, right? And you have the ability to substitute it. The issue you have with Helm and why Helm has been, let's say, debated is that, okay, so for example, let's say the guy, they built a number of substitutions, right? But tomorrow you need other substitutions. So the problem is now you have to change the whole Helm chart. And typically, if it's deeply nested, it becomes very complicated. So the issue is typically with Helm type of things is basically the challenge with it is that in order to maintain it, you basically build an API on top of another API. Basically, that's what the people that criticize Helm are debating is it's okay, you expose one variable, but then tomorrow you need another one. Okay, you need to change the Helm chart, which is typically not the case with things like KRO or Kform or Customize, because they do it out of band. But what you see is that Helm has been there from the beginning. I mean, it was even there from the VM days, right? It was even there before containerization was there. So it has been very popular. But what you have to, if you look to Helm type of approach, is you kind of, you expose some variables via a specific way. And then inside you do the substitution somehow. So you kind of hide the external from the internal world. Whereas the other approaches, they do it more of an, I call it more of an out-of-band approach, is you kind of have an ability to substitute without having to change the main artifact. And that's
all right.
That's the main difference.
Okay, I mean, I'm not an expert here, but I feel it's just so easy to use Helm, right? So, and then I can adjust the YAML, and then I have a load balancer, and if I don't want to have a load balancer, then I can change it to whatever else. And so I think it's really convenient. And so I think if we have the ability to just do Helm install SDC, and you have this YAML, it's really beneficial, because right now we don't have that, right?
No, we do have that. Right now, we have that to a certain extent. But okay, so don't get me wrong. I'm not fully against Helm either, right? I know it's popular. But the issue with Helm is the following, Severin. Tomorrow you want another parameter, right? That is not exposed as a variable. You need to change the Helm chart, right? Whereas in the other approaches, you don't.
Yeah, I see your point. But right now, if we're going to the getting started, then you create a kind cluster, and how do you install it?
Just artifacts. Deploy
just artifacts, right?
Yes, and they are native, right? So Helm will do the same, right? So Helm just has a variable substitution that goes in front of it. But what we do right now is because you don't have too much options, right? You basically install the artifacts. We generate it in the docs as is. The issue that we have is during dev, right? If we are doing development, right? The issue is that, okay, you want this image, he wants this image, he wants that image, right? And so you all want to have a local image, in which case you have to do some local variability for your environment, right? That's why we had something that we used to do so, but there is, as Marcus was saying, I'm not to bind you to something. We should give as many options as possible, because many people have their own flavors.
Yes. I mean,
and so Helm is an option. right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, right now, I think it's if you want to change something, if you want to change the structure, what you have to whatsoever, use a load balancer or change this port whatsoever, you have to change the artifacts directly, right? And so this would be at least easier if you have a Helm file, because you just can add the value there. I think
if
for the user it's easier.
If the Helm chart supports the value.
Oh yeah, so obviously if it doesn't support it, then you have to change it, and I agree, someone has to maintain it. But just I think it's easier for the user to interact or to define how you want to install SDC, right? And I don't know, maybe the Swisscom guys argue that they do it differently. I don't know.
Yeah. For me, it's more the versioning important. I mean, because right now is, how do I know which versions of which one work together? And if I want to do a rollback, I need to go back and figure out which config and data server worked together before, right? So for me, it will solve this issue that then I would have a one version.
Which is the Helm chart, basically. What you're saying is your Helm chart will be the version.
I mean, you have the Helm chart and the underlying then application, but
yeah. I mean, I think just the other project like Cilium, they use it and I like it a lot.
No, see, there is multiple people use different mechanisms, right? And I'm of the opinion we should be flexible with SDC to give many options.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you want to be flexible, it's also more complicated to maintain everything, right? So
not
I don't say it's wrong.
Not if you do it right, in my view, right? So if you do it right, because if you look to what we did in Nefio as a project was mainly about that, by the way.
Okay.
So like if you look at KPT, for example, it's another way to do variable substitution. But yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that we should. What I'm saying is that Helm is bad as a first-class entity, because in order to support another format, you actually have to extract all the data. So it's not a good format to actually be the source. It's a good format as a derived object.
Yeah, that's true.
Because of the fact that it encapsulates the charts inside of another entity, and then your values become the exposure, basically, which is basically where you change the ports and the images and stuff like that. But if you want to support another format using Helm as the primary source, it's not easy. You create way more work to extract it. But I think what I'll do is I'll have a look to the Helm charts repo, because at the end of the day, it comes down to which parameters we want to have flexible, right? And then, because right now we haven't been focused on that at all. The only thing that we have focused upon is which images, the image tags, because we needed that for our code generation in various places. That's the only thing we have been focused upon as a variable right now. But if there is other parameters that we need to export, there is various ways to make them happen.
There was the issue I had with changing or conditionally adding a command line parameter to make the data server and config server run in trace mode, right? Which seems to also not be easy to do with Kform. So that's also one thing where we see, like, our actual approach seems to have issues.
Yeah, but I think I have a way. I gave you a way to do it, right? But then you moved on. So
no, I think the stuff you proposed was not working.
That was a conditional based approach.
Yeah, but it was I mean, in the end, it was a slice, right? An array that needed to conditionally add something, and your approach, I think, if I remember correctly. Didn't work on slices, but on maps, basically, like on keys, something like that. I mean,
yeah, I don't know the whole concept, but I thought I found a way to do it. But yeah, I think what I think we are discussing is we need to find a way to support these variable multiple formats. And I think your point is basically you want to have also version control to it, right? That's basically what you're saying, is you want to actually use it also to version some of the artifacts, right?
Yeah, basically, so I know which ones work together.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I think we discussed that last year, I guess, by the end of the last year, that in the docs, the version env mentions the version of the config and data server which work together.
Yes.
I remember correctly.
That's correct.
So if you take those, you should be fine.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, but at the moment we haven't tagged the docs so far, right? So in other words, it was you need to have a commit hash. You need to look at the commit hash to do it, which is kind of a bit painful, I guess, right? But from the moment we start adding the versions to the docs, you that will give you that thing. But also, if we have helm charts, they will be part of that. They will be in that repo as well, right? So, or any other tool should be part of that repo, and then we can use that.
Okay, but I agree that we need to maintain it. But I mean, I don't have experience in creating helm charts. I don't know how much work that is.
See, the problem is always every time you need a parameter, you need to have you basically need to build a Go template, right? And then say what is the input, map the input to the variable, and so basically so you basically use Go templating to do the variable substitution. That's how Helm works. So you have like a values.yaml file, which is basically your input, right? So that's you say do this or do that, right? And then what you do is you build a template using Go templates that basically use the input of the variable, right? And then they use that in order to then substitute your artifact. That's kind of how it works.
I mean, in the end, if you have the basic structure and you want to add something, usually it's a few lines of code, right? You change it in the config map, and then you add it also in the values YAML that you can add this option. So it's 2 lines of code usually. So to maintain it, I would say it's quite easy. We have services running for 5 years, and we changed them maybe 10 times in the last few years.
Yeah, the problem is always when you have more so what you see is that certain helm charts, the issue is not with a single value. The issue is typically some of these things get nested, right? If this, then do that, then this, and then so it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we have a lot of development work. So if it right now it changes a lot, right? So then maybe you're changing the Helm chart every week. Hopefully this changes now.
Yeah, so see, the bad side of Helm is that for every parameter you have in the system, you need a variable.
Yeah.
That's the worst case, which means that you create another API on top of your own system, right? So that's what we see when we distribute our packet core type of systems. Those Helm charts are very complicated, extremely complicated stuff.
I mean, yeah, in the end, we have to decide if it's beneficial to the end user to have a Helm chart. If the end user want the Helm chart and they can maintain it and use it, then it's okay. If not, then we should not do it.
No, but I see it differently, Severin, right? So there are consumers of that basically love Helm, right? It's up to the producer, which is us, to please them, right? So we are kind of tasked with the complexity, you see? Because the consumer doesn't care how you do it, as long as you get it.
Yeah, I totally agree there. But just what I wanted to say, if there are consumers, they want Helm, then we should do it. If it's beneficial to the user, and if not, then we should avoid it, right? But
Sure, but I think my view is there is definitely consumers that love Helm, because otherwise Helm is kind of the most popular tool these days in that space.
Yeah.
Although it has been challenged with a number of alternatives. So I think Helm is a must, is what I'm trying to say for us.
Yeah, I think so too. Because our cloud guys, they also, if they have a Helm chart, they love the tool. If there is no Helm chart, they don't like it too much, to be honest.
No, yeah, I get it. Yeah, if you are incubated with Helm, that's the case, right?
Yeah.
All right. So the other topic that I still wanted to have as a discussion was, okay, so the next thing that we are going to tackle is this clear deviation stuff, right? So which we discussed last time, or which we the reason why we wanted to tackle that first is because that's a capability that we had in the past that we now no longer have, right? So we need to fix that. That's why we believe we need to prioritize that. So we create an epic for this. Here. I made a proposal, by the way. Okay. So this is a potential API implementation. So maybe we can look at the bottom. So first of all, I think I'm not yet fully happy with the approach, but I think, but let's discuss it in a bit. So the idea is to make an API which is called deviation clear, which is already, or we had some alternatives, but I took deviation clear right now. We can change the name, not a problem. Now, the question is, what would be the name and the namespace for it? So originally, before I was thinking about it, my idea was to use the labels here, but we could as well use the name and the namespace. So we could use the target name and namespace as the entity, because the idea of the clear deviation is we submit it to the API, we target the device, we execute the command, and then it's kind of done, right? So we don't necessarily store it in the API server. So as a result, it's kind of will be applied to the target, right? And then inside of it, yeah, so it's not, so the indentation didn't work, it seems, properly, or I didn't put the right text here. But so the idea is you have items. So, and within the spec, you can have, so at the moment we defined 4 types. One is so pointing to a config, pointing to a target, pointing to all config or everything. And then you have a set of paths. So this is just an example, but you can have a list, right, of paths associated with that type. And then it's only when there is a config type that the name of the config, which is basically the intent name, is relevant. But in all the others, this is not relevant. That's why it's here, it's optional, right, in the specification. So that's kind of the proposal. Any questions or comments?
How is then with target? Do you need to define a target then, or?
Yeah, we always, if you don't have a target, you cannot go. A target is a device, right, or is a CNF, or is so the target. So the idea is to use the target and the target name, name and namespace of the device you are on which you want to clear the deviation.
Okay. Yeah.
And so target is the name that we use. So, but it can, so it's basically your GNMI or netconf session, the thing that targets that. So if you look, so this is my real system. If you do kubectl get targets, oops. Right. So you target this guy here, right? The name. This is now Nokia, but it can be Ericsson or it can be anything that you have, right? So you target this thing.
So I did not follow the whole communication between you and others, but so it seems that we get rid of the deviation type, right? The last discussion we had was about if there is unmanaged targets or targets. I think it's not there anymore, right?
Yes, it is still there. So what I just did, I called it type because I think the fact that it's called deviation type is not so good, right? But the type, if you look to the implementation here, so the type is the overall name, but it's actually, I call it deviation clear type, because the deviation type, you only have config and target, whereas here we also have all config and all. So all config means you would clear the interface of all the configurations, of all the intents at the same time. So you basically, this makes a lot of sense when you do wildcards or something like that, right? So you basically have so this is merely for wildcarding capability, but the deviation target is kind of still there, but it's a little bit extended in its capability. So in a deviation itself, you can only have config or targets. Here you could have all means irrespective of target of config, so I don't care, right? Whereas all configs means the intent doesn't matter, but you're not targeting unhandled.
Yeah, all is basically all configs and targets, right? That means also revert unhandled, like delete unhandled and revert non-revertives that are that do not match the intended state. That's basically what it means.
Correct.
Okay, so if it's still there, even improved, that's good. So this is the only thing I wanted to manage to mention. The other thing is I would vote for deviation reset instead clear. It's just personal preference. I think it's.
I have no opinion. The only thing that I don't, but yeah, okay, yeah. Let's first focus on. I'll tell you what I don't like at the moment myself about it. But
resetting it is like it's there, and I'm bringing it to its initial state, right? But you're actually getting rid of the deviation. If we want to be picky here,
so it would be deletion.
Of wording.
It should be delete then.
Deletion or removal.
At the same time, it is an undo or revertive action. So, I mean, whatever. Let's call it duck.
Yeah, the name. See, yeah, we can discuss forever on the name.
The only thing is, in my opinion, it should be a noun, and clear is a verb, isn't it? That's the only thing.
That's correct. So that is the problem I have with it, right? So the real problem I have with it, it shouldn't be a CR, okay? It should be a sub-resource. So that's what I put here. So in other words, it should be /target. So you basically, if you look to the API of REST, right? So in Kubernetes, it's APIs, I think, and then group tenant /target with a name, right? And then it should be /deviation reset. And then that's the real, but the problem that we have is that targets are handled by etcd, not by our own API server. So, and if a CRD only supports status and scale as supported sub-resources, so you cannot do anything else as a CRD. In our own API server, so in other words, I agree with you, Severin, right? that by looking at the name and the concept, the way as a CRD, it's actually the wrong, it doesn't feel right at all, right? So that has been my reservation. But to do it right with a CRD, it's impossible, which would mean that we would have to move the targets not from not having it as a true CRD, but we have to move them to our own API server. And then I need to figure out whether our own API server, I could support sub-resources that are not scale and status. I have looked into the code for a while, so I'm not sure yet how to do so. But these are the two implications. Because we are targeting a device, or meaning a target. At the moment, our implementation of a target is using etcd as a backend, not our own API server. So, and I'm sure that there is no support for sub-resources other than scale and status. So if we want to go down the sub-resources path, we have to move target to our own API server, which means that storage-wise, it's not etcd backed, it will be PagerDB and stuff like that. So it's a rather big change if we go down that path. But I feel architecturally, from an API point of view, it is the right way to do it. So the question is, should we investigate that? But it has rather severe implications, or it has rather big. It's a big change, potentially. We need to dig into it.
I mean, to be honest, it's big changes. At least for me, it's always hard to follow. Say, if you see a pull request with a few thousand lines of code, so at some point it's hard to follow. I don't know about others. Maybe they are more familiar with the code base and also the details. I would say from a design perspective, it would be good to try to change that, like to go for the hard part, the hard way. But maybe I'm not as familiar as I should be with the code base, with these design decisions.
Yeah, I mean, this is really Kubernetes at the core, right? Where this problem lies.
Yes, exactly.
But so the key question here is, do we all agree that the deviation targets, or is targeting the target? I'm of the opinion of it, right? So that so you actually clear a deviation of a target. So one of the reworks that we also did, but that happened a while ago, that was during the summer, is that in the original days we had our unit of action was a config, right? So we had a config, and then we had reconcilers per config, right? The problem was, if you have 10 configs and they were all depending on each other, then in which order do they apply, right? So we had this issue that we had these interdependencies, and then the reconciliation loop eventually will figure it out, but it took way too long, and there was way too much churn, and the more configs you had, the more it took and the more churn it was, right? So at some point we decided to no longer do it on so we still have config as a unit, but what we do is we pick all the configs of a given target, and then we transact them as a whole, right? So that's kind of a change that we did during the summer. So as a result of that, these days, all the transactions or everything that we do on a device, even if you have 1,000 config snippets, they will all be bundled together and acted upon, right? And as a result, it scales. I have the feeling this scales way better, and it's way more deterministic, and it's more stable, because before we had all kinds of challenges. Okay, it didn't work, then it's recovered, and so on and so forth, right? So as a result, a single config reconciler is no longer there. So they're all target-based. And so from that perspective, I also believe that clearing a deviation is on a per target level. And as such, that's why I feel it should be a target, something you do on a target, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. And then given this is a clear, right? It's really not. So it's actually you do an action. You don't really create the resort, or this is really an action that you do to get rid of something, right? So that is what sub resources are for. And as such, I feel that is architecturally the right approach.
So you would have a resource which is a deviation, and then you would have a sub resource which is the action, the associated action. Remove this deviation.
Yeah. So for example, you have log, right? Log on a pod is a sub resource. The way it's implemented is you actually go to the API and then you say log, and what you do is you log. So there is a buffer for that reconciler in that pod, and then you start logging all the entities for that particular thing. So it's very similar to this, right? So you kind of say clear deviation or delete deviation, whatever we call it, right? And it would take an action to do that. And then, so you don't, some sub resources you can store data, right? So you could store some information somewhere, but for others you don't, right? So you could, for example, what we could do to own the result, we could build an event, right, on then the target resource to say clear deviation failed, and here is the reason. So you could record an event, but the event is actually on the target, but the action is basically clear deviation failed, or delete deviation, or reset deviation failed, right? And so you store the event on the original object on which you execute the resource with the subsequent data, right? We could also, for example, say in the status of the resource, we could say, or we could do it somewhere else, right? We could somewhere basically store the information of the actions we executed in order to log it. But I have, since a week, this bad feeling in me that if we create it as a real CR or as a real resource, we don't really store it, and it's not really feeling correct.
Yeah, I mean, how you explained it before sounded right to me. I mean, since all the configs are rejected at once, and then, yeah, it's related to a target, and the deviation is related to a target, and then we have the action related to the deviation. So sounds right.
Yeah, so the big change is that I have to move the target towards our own API server, and then I need to dig into how to do it. I feel architecturally it's the right approach. So let me, I think I need to investigate this to see whether it's possible or not. I don't know.
And is there no way that we don't have to move it to the own API server?
That I'm sure it will not work. That I'm pretty sure, because in the CRD spec, right, I need to, yeah, so some people need to drop, yeah, I can understand. If you look to the CRD sub-resources, see, yeah. See, the only two that are supported are those two, you see?
Status and scale.
Yeah. And I've looked into the code because I use in the API server, I use the same code basically, and it's really the code there. So you have to write code to support it, right? So that's why it's not like I define a sub-resource and all of a sudden I have support. So you have the whole backend needs to handle that, because you also need to set, let's say, permissions, the whole RBAC rules and stuff like that needs to support it. So it has lots of implications all over the place into the system.
Yes, I understand.
That's why I'm pretty sure it's not supported.
Okay.
And I don't think it has changed. Yeah.
But this is only if we design it as a sub-resource, right? So if it's an own CRD, it would work. So
yes, but that's the big decision we have to make. That's the big decision to go after?
Yeah, to be honest, I have never thought about the definition of an CRD and what is sub-resource used for. But as I told before, I think, as you explained, it sounds right to me to have the CRD, which would be a target, and then the sub-resource, which would be deviation, and then the sub-resource, which is clear or not is remove or delete or whatsoever. So it sounds right to me.
I will dig into it to see. I'll do a small test and a prototype to see whether I can get it to work, right? And if so, yeah, I'll let you know. But
that's good. I think there was one thing we discussed is it still a deviation if it's an unmanaged target? I would say. I don't know. I don't know if this also maybe this also has to be considered by designing that. I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up. So
to me it is, because in the end we're talking about a system that defines an intended state, right? That's what it's all about. And unhandled configuration, so a configuration that sits there on the device where we do not have that we do not have an intent for, right? That's what the unhandled is. That's a deviation from the intended state.
yeah, that's how in the beginning we separated it. But then when we were looking at it and the APIs were the same, we came to that conclusion somehow. But it was also not obvious to us, by the way, in the beginning, Severin, right? So we also went back and forth.
So for me, it would be really nice if you have a place somewhere at the documentation to write that down, because it's so many things, and I think it would be good that we have it written down somewhere where we can say, okay, here that's the case, because.
But it should be in the user guide, in my view, in our user guide. If it's not clear there, because there is, it's probably not big, but there is a section on target versus config, right? I'm pretty sure because I actually added that note in there.
Deviation, there it is. Unhandled, not applied, overruled, right?
Yeah, correct. So
one. Yeah, I have to. Oh, that's good. Okay, maybe it's my.
I wrote that now. If it's sufficient, I don't know, but yeah, there is some text here.
Yeah, I will read it and then I'll let you know, because right now I think I understand it now, but if I read it, you will see if it's.
I'm not sure whether we are documenting target versus config or something like that. Maybe there is definitely maybe some improvements that we can do.
Yeah, I mean in general also. So I wanted to look at your huge PR and I could not get the dev environment running, and so if I would wish to have at least some information how I get started, because maybe some others also want to review something. I don't know if they have the same problems as me, or maybe it's just me.
But yeah, so I will add something in the development space here, right? So I think Marcus has like local development. Maybe we should say config server if you want to test it or something like that. Here's what you do. What I wrote down. So this is our section.
Yeah, right now with the change, like with the split of config server, a couple of things had to change, and some variables had to go in this place, and some in that, like environment variables within your VS Code config and so on. But yeah, I'm happy to take a look with you and figure out a way to make it run, and then also figure out how to improve the doc.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let's we can have another meeting and then we can look at it together, and then I also can write the docs. I just think it's beneficial to others, because I don't know about the Swisscom guys or the other guys. Maybe they have their dev set up. For me, it was always I was kind of a user. I could install it, I could use it. That's nice. But now, if I want to look at the PRs and I want to review it properly, then I need the setup right, because I'm just a bit scared that I say, okay, looks good to me, and then something breaks. It should not happen, right?
Oh, but okay, we are all humans. But yeah, I agree. So we need to be have or document somewhere the capability to allow you to do it by yourself. 100%. Yeah.
That would be great. I mean, I'm happy to help there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's why it's good to get that feedback, right? Because that's how we can improve, basically.
Yeah, because you also understand it's if you want to do debug config server data servers, there's a lot of complexity in it. And so if you want to get started and you fail to have a dev, so that's kind of discouraging. So
understood.
Yeah. No, but it's good. Maybe there is another the batch release starts on Thursday, right? And we talked about if we should have one repo, CLI2, however you want to call it. Should we do an own repo in the SDC group, or should we just have it privately and try to move it in summer?
It's up to you. We can create a private group in SDC if you want. If we believe that it should end up there, then we can always create a private group there. That is, and then you don't have to move it. But also moving a repo is not the end of the world.
I mean, there was something I thought about is if I do if I look at the pull requests in the private repo, I can do it on my own and say, okay, it's nice, and then I can merge it into main.
Yeah.
If it's in the SDC, I think then it has to have at least 2 reviews, right? And so it's maybe a bit difficult if you have another repo.
Depends how you set it up, because the rules are per repo, I think, Gurgly, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
So a private repo.
We can set up any branch protection rules what you want. It's totally configurable.
Okay, I thought it has to be 2 at least for CNCF.
No, it's our own. No, it's not. It's our own rule.
We have set ourselves up to be part of CNCF, and CNCF mandates that as a rule, right? But if you create a private repo in the organization that is owned by ourselves, we don't have to. We could be very flexible. We have control over it. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so we could do that. And I will look at the code, review it, and ensure the code quality is right. But and then in this case, we also can do a private repo and then merge it in summer into it. And
it's up to you. You will have some dependencies with SDC, like with us who are on the call here, potentially, because we have to set it up. You don't have the group on which the repo is owned. We need to add the people to the group and stuff like that. So there's these type of complications. So maybe it's not worth doing that at this stage.
No, I think we should not overcomplicate it. Just we do it as a private thing, and then in summer, we can decide to move it to SDC. I think this is a good idea to do it like that.
Yeah.
Don't make it too private. I mean, we could also have, or at least I would volunteer to take a look at some point if we have some discussions around it.
Yeah, I mean, we also can have it as a public repository. It's nothing secret, right?
Yeah.
But and then at some point we can merge it to the SDC community if we all decide it's a good move.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking if you create it within your university's Git repo or something and no access from the outside, it might be worth creating it at least publicly on GitHub.
Yeah, it's I think also easier
kind
to
of comment.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, we will do that. Perfect. All right, I also should go, but we have another meeting I think on Thursday regarding a batch thesis. So
I saw there's an invitation. Yeah. Okay, I'll be there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye bye.
Cheers.
All right.
All right. See you.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Do we need to discuss anything? You've set up the controller bits of the revert deviations stuff now, right?
I've
So we
installed
need to.
I've
So we need
installed
to.
everything basically from scratch, right? So I removed kind cluster, installed data server, config server. Of course, I didn't do very extensive tests, but I wanted to see that the basics was working with the reverter. That worked.
No, I mean, I was now down the lines of reverting non-revertives, like the stuff you showed before, like .github issue 19, right?
The thing that we were discussing before, yeah. So the main thing, what I understood, I need to see whether I can do this this sub-resource stuff, right?
Yeah.
I have no idea yet whether I can. I need to figure out how to do it, and I need to find a bit of time to dig into it because I need probably half a day without a disturbance to figure it out. Is my feeling. So I'm going, but from an API perspective, I think for you, it doesn't really matter how it gets to you or how we do it in the API server, right? So I think if you look to the semantics that you saw in the API, whether we do it with a sub-resource or a CR or whatever.
No, that doesn't matter to me. It's just like, it's only about defining the the API call and the structs that we want to send over it or need to send over it. But that's basically what you have defined there as well, right? I mean, it is Cube API dialect, but yeah, I can just take that and translate that into our SDCPB and publish, right? Or
yeah. So the question is, the only thing that we need to do is, do we make it as part of the transaction set or not, right? Because we could do, one way is to do it the way that we did it in the past, right?
What is the way we did in the past?
So the way we did clearing of deviations, right, was we kind of, it was an intent name, right?
And you didn't send you stopped sending the higher prioritized deviation. That's what you did. But now we're down to sending paths, right?
Yeah, but before I was also sending paths, right? I was sending a path with a name, right? Because we really didn't do clear deviation for unhandled. We only did clear deviation for a config, right?
Mm-hmm. And in my view, you did then simply not include the override, the deviations in the intent that you sent. That you sent.
Yeah, okay. No, you're right. Yeah, correct. So
that was maybe your internals, but I mean, in the end, what I will do is I will.
My question is, should it be part of the transaction set or not? I feel it's easier.
So I will internally make sure I'm pretty quickly getting onto that execution path within data server, right? Mm-hmm. With the low-level transaction and blah blah blah. So yeah, I don't have a preference right now.
I have the feeling if we put it in the transaction set, right, you kind of bundle all the changes together, right? If you can. That's what I am thinking, is that we should, whether you clear or not.
Yeah, but the issue is overloading an API call with different mutually exclusive permutations in the end.
No, that's we are not doing that, right?
So that means a single transaction could be overwrite the configuration
As well as clear, yeah.
as well as, I mean, that again is kind of a contradiction, right?
No.
Yes, if you replace the configuration on the device, then it's not that, then you don't care about clearing deviations, because that's clearing your deviations already, kind of.
See, I'm of the opinion we should design for something on which we can build on the longer run, right? So that means that your knowledge of whether there is a config should not be in the data server. And that would allow us to do so. Whether you get it from config server or somewhere else, I don't care, right? But it allows us to do that.
In the end, I will anyways need to have access to and be able to retrieve the intents myself, right? So I don't really care if you send them to me or not, right?
Why?
That's a matter of overhead, because I need to calculate deviations.
Yes. But so we send them, right? So what I'm trying to say is you need to fetch them from somewhere, right? So either you get them or you fetch them. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
No, correct. But what I'm trying to say is that whether you send them or get them doesn't. You need both APIs. But what I'm trying to say is we should be able to design it in a way that you don't have to fetch them if you get them. Because today with configs, you always get them. And they are always fresh from the beginning. They are complete. And it would be the same here, by the way.
Okay, I'm taking a look and see if we make it part of the set transaction. Another thing that needs to be thought of is the whole rollback and so on. Like what this additional operation would mean for rollbacks and network-wide transaction and so on, right? I mean, so network-wide transaction can be ignored, but like we have the rollback stuff, and if we...
For me, rollback is somehow similar, right? So I think for me, rollback, if you really want to say, here, go to this specific thing, you will get a replace. Right? Which would also be a transaction.
Okay, I'll see and check if we can bake that into set.
Yeah, I would do all of that in the set transaction code, because then we can use it in various flavors.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yep.
All right.
Let's just.
Okay, doke.
Yeah, that's it from my side.
All right. Yeah. I need to dig into it, but it will be Wednesday or something like that. I can have a look. So stuck. Let me see whether I can find some time, some moments. But
all right. Let's
all
do
right.
so.
Yeah.
Cheers. Bye.